addressed to Mimecast will clearly identify the purpose, nature, and extent of the activity which access is required. The IT team within the PIC will then facilitate the implementation of access granted. I attach here too, for demonstration purposes, a copy of a letter requesting super administrator privileges to the forensic investigation company in relation to the VBS investigation, marked Annexure MM13. From the perspective of Mimecast, access is granted only when it has been duly authorized by certain senior officials within the PIC. I attach here to a letter from Mimecast dated 4 May 2018, addressed to the PIC, confirming measures in place to grant super administrator privileges, marked Annexure MM14. It is to be noted that the letter states that, open quotations, requests must be made by a customer employee with the title of director or higher, close quotation. Placing the approval responsibility at a senior level is in recognition of the high risk that the grant of such privileges exposes to the business. It therefore follows that granting such privileges on a permanent basis and without checks and balances is not in line with good governance and in fact borders on irresponsibility and or recklessness. The case in point is clearly demonstrates this danger. I attach here to the letter dated 16 November 2017, signed by Ms. Menye and addressed to Mimecast, requesting that Mr. Maisela be granted super administrator privileges on a permanent basis, marked Annexure MM15. It is to be observed that the letter does not specify reasons and activity for which such access is required. Mr. Maisela then utilized the rights of access to monitor email communication of employees within the PIC, including myself. I attach here to email correspondence from Mimecast, which indicates Mr. Maisela's activities on the Mimecast system marked Annexure MM16.
Do I understand you correctly that this privilege that was granted to Mr. Maisela was in breach of the PIC policies and procedures?
So, if we recall, what I'm clarifying is he was granted permanent rights, which and I'm demonstrating that in permanent rights without having necessary controls, this is what he did, which is in breach because the normal process you write a memo to the CEO and you indicate.
Can I just ask you there, I'm assuming that when you became aware of this, you discussed with Ms. Mienya why she granted that? Because I think if I recall correctly, her testimony here was that it was granted because it was the nature of the job that he had been employed for, was to look into the issues of security and therefore needed to have that kind of broad access. Did you have conversations with her about it and her reasoning?
So through you, Commissioner, if you pick up this information we got from Mimecast on the 8th of May, so this was, if I recall clearly, post the settlement agreement being reached, because I think it was reached in April. So this transpired, the outcome of this came surfaced during the disciplinary of Mr. Maisela. So that's where this information came out to exactly what he was accessing during the time which he was given super privileges.
And does that imply that Mimecast did not comply with its own requirements, that you only have this level of sign-off and it is on a limited basis? Because if it took that amount of time for them to notify you, is that a problem that you addressed?
So I'd say yes, and I'm not defending them. I'd say yes, because the letter was not signed by the CEO, but was signed by the executive head of IT.
So what measures did you take? IT reporting to yourself as the CFO, what measures did you take about Mimecast, not about Maisela and Mien?
So at the time that it transpired, I was on maternity leave, but the processes that was taken post this coming out, it was reiterating to Mimecast that no other person besides the letter issued by the CEO will be required for you to grant super user rights. And if you note any of the subsequent letters where we've issued regarding having super user rights, we then write to Mimecast that they need to then provide a log of what that person who was given super user rights accessed. So that log must be given to internal audit. So it's the one letter I've written subsequent to that, which was for the VBS, to say we need to start monitoring, to say if you've given someone access to do this, that access is limited to what it was granted for.
And does internal audit check with Mimecast that this is exactly what is done and that there isn't anything else that you're unaware of?
So like I've highlighted, it's a process that I introduced that after learning about this. So internal audit, and I'll need to confirm, like with the VBS, that they did get the log and test that what the work was done was in accordance to what the rights were given for, the access. Okay. So page 11, 4.3.12. The contention that Mr. Maisela was the only one with access to the password is misplaced. The problem is that Mr. Maisela's access is broad and has not been subjected to any applicable controls and/or checks and balances to guard against abuse. Hence, he was able to use that access to monitor email communication of employees undetected and without their consent. In trying to justify this unlawful action of monitoring the emails of employees without following due process, he made a statement before this commission that he retrieved confidential information from the PIC in order to assist the police in the investigation. I attach here too the extract from Mr. Maisela's statement marked Annexure MM17. Needless to emphasize that there are laws that regulate this disclosure and that Mr. Maisela did not comply with such laws and therefore acted illegally.
Given that statement, have you taken any measures to lay charges against Mr. Maisela? Because he further indicated that he was continuing, although he had left, he was continuing to get information and provide it to the police. Given that this is unlawful, have you as PIC taken any measures?
So as things stand, we're trying to ascertain how he's getting access to additional information because,
exclude the additional information. The first question would be, is that given that he acted in this manner, which is illegal, there are two elements, the illegal activity and whether it's in breach of those laws, as you've indicated in 4313, have you as PIC taken any steps to address that? And the second question is, has there been any further information about the continued information provided to him, illegally or whichever means it is being done? Because one assumes he's no longer got access to the PIC, and certainly not to Mimecast, one assumes that.
So to answer the first question, so this was part and parcel of his disciplinary. So this information transpired during his disciplinary, and my understanding was formulating together with his charges, hence to relating the outcome was his dismissal. With regards to are we doing legal charges, like doing criminal, no, not that I'm aware of as the PIC. Then your second part of your question relating to whether we're testing. So if I recall earlier on, I highlighted that we've done a vulnerability and penetration test to try to identify weaknesses in the process, and we've agreed that it will be done annually to pick up. So it is difficult, in my view, sometimes it's difficult when somebody are physically given access to us information. One of the key things that we were doing, and I think it's in the then assistance of the Office of the Company Secretary, if memory serves me well, is to start categorizing information, in which there's a law, categorizing confidentiality information and seeing where it resides and making sure that there are necessary controls in place to make sure that classifying super confidential information to make sure that it's residing in a very secure place. So performance-related matters. I had the opportunity to go through the statement of Mr. Pulwane as well as the transcript of his testimony before the Commission on the 27th and the 28th May 2019 relating to allegations of victimization and or intimidation in respect of performance-related matters, and in particular in relation to Ms. Candace Abrams, Mr. Paul Magula, and Mr. Victor Siani. I do not believe that there are any specific issues that the Commission raised which require my input in my capacity as the CFO. In this course, this of course excludes allegations made by Mr. Siani in relation to the IR transaction, which I deal with in the IR transaction section of the statement. Should the Commission request that I address any specific allegation, I am more than willing to prepare a supplementary statement in relation thereto. 4.5. Other forms of victimization. Based on my reading of the statement of Mr. Polwane, as well as the transcript of his testimony before the Commission on the 27th and the 28th May, I'm of the view that Mr. Polwane has generally addressed the main allegations made by Mr. Sandile Sibiya and Ms. Nonzama Beje. Should the Commission request that I address any specific allegation, I'm more than willing to prepare supplementary statements. I wish to address specific allegations made by Mr. Leanda Ntwane, Ms. Petronella Decker, and Ms. Pamela Pala, which directly relate to me. Mr. Ntwane. Based on my reading of the statement of Mr. Ntwane dated 1st March 2019, as well as the transcript of his testimony before the Commission on 5 March 2019, my understanding is that Mr. Ntwane made allegations and or insinuations that I had a personal vendetta against him. I do not intend to deal with each and every allegation or insinuations made by him in this regard, and this should not be construed as an admission of any such allegation and or insinuation. I wish to point out that any disagreements with Mr. Ntwane were at all times with respect to me carrying out my duties and responsibilities in the capacity as the CFO and Mr. Ntwane's line manager. For the purpose of the statement, I wish to refer to one incident where I had a disagreement with Mr. Ntwane when executing my responsibility as the CFO, which Mr. Ntwane considered to be a victimization.
Can I just stop you there? I just want to check one or two things from Mr. Ntwane's statement and to see. He says that he was reporting to Dr. Majila, and that changed, and he started to report to you, and there was no sort of a good relationship between you and him. What happened? What triggered it? Did this happen? What happened? Was there some fallout? Can you just take us through that, please?
So, through you, Chair, through you, Commissioner. So, I specifically picked an incident that took, in my statement, I specifically took an incident that happened in 2015, which is during the period where there was a change in reporting, which I think, in my belief, it was one of the incidences that Mr. Ntwane was really unhappy with regarding the process I followed. So if you maybe allow me, I'll go through that part because I think it highlights one of the biggest disagreements which Mr. Ntwane I know was not happy about. During July 2015, whilst the tender for the procurement of a finance system was underway, Mr. Ntwane requested a representative of SAP to contact me for advice with regards to the status of the tender. I highlighted to the representative that I'm not permitted to meet or provide guidance to individual bidders, and therefore any queries should be referred to the contact person stipulated in the tender document. Furthermore, I then requested Mr. Ntwane to refrain from advertising bidders to contact me directly, as this compromised my position as the CFO. I attach here to email correspondence relating to this matter marked Annexure MM18. What made me more concerned was that during 2014, when we were preparing the 2015-2016 budget, Mr. Ntwane had indicated that a bulk of the IT CapEx budget would be taken up by SAB. I attach here to email correspondence relating to the budget marked Annexure MM19. At the point of budgeting, the identification of SAB as a yardstick for benchmarking the possible cost for budget purposes was not out of the ordinary. Taking into consideration what was used as a benchmark for budgeting, the email correspondence from the SAP representatives was worrisome. I further wish to highlight that the reason for Mr. Ntwane's suspension was due to a whistleblower making serious allegations of misconduct against him. I attach here to the submission by the whistleblower and the outcome of the independent forensic investigation marked Annexure MM20A and MM20B.
Sorry, can I interrupt you? When referring to the email MM18,
Yes.
who is Pedro Tembe?
Pedro Tembe, if you look at his email, he indicates he is a SAP representative that a SAP representative. So he works for SAP.
But it is Pedro Tembe who contacted you directly.
So it's Pedro Tembe who contacted me directly. So if you refer to the second page of that email, you see the initial email where Mr. Pedro Tembe highlights that he had been in contact with Mr. Ntwane and his team, and he has asked me to get in contact with you for advice. He highlights first line, which I didn't read. He says, I'm the account executive at SAP Africa, and that's tasked to look after PIC solution requirements. And at that point in time, we didn't even have SAP as a system.
Good. Thank you.
Is there any other occasion when something happened between the two of you? Because I find it difficult for someone to say we don't get along, or there's victimization towards me or against me, and you give this as a reason. I mean, to me, this is just a disagreement, and that's it.
So, 3 commissioners. So, for me, that was the 2015, because that, in my belief, made Mr. Ntwane very unhappy, because he was really supporting of the system. Further, I've attached the forensic report that was done, and if you refer to it, and if I recall clearly, some of the statements that Mr. Ntwane made before this commission was things that I would not approve his travel. So if you refer to that forensic investigation, it highlights certain issues. So one of the issues, it also highlights that there was a recruitment that took place, and I had raised that the salary being awarded appears to be in excess. And the report further concludes that it was found that that employee had a relationship outside the PIC office with Mr. Ntwane. So if I recall, he served here and said I affected his recruitment. So that was the one incident that I could recall. So it's inside the forensic report where they highlight that I'd raised the review note, and it highlighted that. Other incidences, which I have not specifically mentioned, so you'd see he makes incidences that I was limiting his traveling. There's a trip that I actually, so to put that trip, we had a discussion that there were issues in IT, and I'd requested for him to address them. And in that's where the trip. And if you refer to the forensic investigation report, it highlights that there were issues regarding his trips with his team. One of them comments it makes that there's inappropriate messages being sent by him to his staff, female staff members. So the forensic, it's ultimately, which comes from a whistleblower, for me, is it gives incidences that later on transpired. For me, in my view, that would have made Mr. Ntwane uncomfortable in terms of what was happening. So for me, my statement before the commission is, I never, in my view, I was just carrying out my duties. I've never had a personal vendetta. It was just carrying out my duties in terms of procurement, carrying out my duties in terms of also managing costs.
Can I just ask you about this the SAP matter? It's a procurement thing. Now, you find that the head of IT advises one of the bidders to contact you directly. That is in breach of supply chain management. Was there only this email correspondence between you and the IT head, or did you call him in and say, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Was there any personal interaction?
So we did, if I recall, we did have a discussion regarding it. So where I've said to him, please refrain. And he then highlighted to me, no, this is service providers just taking chances. But as I highlighted in my statement, that for me, now when this happened, there were other things that were worrisome for me. That, first of all, he provided the contact details to the IT team of who to address at SAP. Why would, as the PIC, when we don't even make use of SAP, would we have an executive? And why would the representative from SAP specifically make mention to him? So I did have a discussion with him, which he then highlighted that it was just, they're trying to use his name onto it. But for me, there were other evidence that were there that suggested, and I just highlighted to him that, I'm uncomfortable because you're compromising my position. It's a system within my time, and when a tender is out in the open, no one's allowed to communicate with anyone besides the procurement office.
Was there a problem for him reporting to a woman?
I don't know. I don't want to speculate.
What was your impression?
I don't want to speculate whether it was a problem or a thing, but I'll always like to say it's inherent when being a female and being young. There'll always be, I'm cognizant of it that, I'll have to prove myself. But I don't think he had, outside the workspace, we actually were civil to each other. So I don't recall, even when he left, I don't recall us hating each other, not greeting each other, looking at each other funny. So I think he's the best person to inquire, but I would choose to believe in this day and age there'll be nobody who would discriminate against me due to my sex.
Did you have actual meetings when you talk about discussions, or were they emails and correspondence?
So we'd have meetings, but not formalized meetings. So we'd have meetings, and if I recall properly, and the key distinction must be made, that if I recall Mr. Ntwane's statement, he said, my gatekeeper was the general manager of finance. He's not my gatekeeper. He's just a signatory before my signature. So it's not that I had sent him to gatekeep, but he was doing out his duties, because prior to a memorandum coming to me, it actually goes via the general manager of finance. Even the budget, he's the first line of review, I'm the second line of review. So we'd have meetings. We'll have meetings in form of discussion. IT would attend certain meetings, which we established an ITRC committee, which was predominantly a management committee to deal with risk and IT systems, because we saw IT as a very critical space.
His claim that there were no meetings with you on a one-to-one about his work is incorrect? Or is it that because they're informal, there isn't a formal situation in which this is a regular meeting, we meet on this time, there's minutes kept, there's a record of the discussion?
I would say, I would agree with you that I think because there's no formal meeting, but so what I'm trying to highlight, there were no formal meetings that records
Why
kept.
would there be no formal meetings between you as a CFO and a department as important as IT, dealing with procurement, dealing with security, dealing with all kinds of stuff of that nature? Why would you not have a regular formal meeting?
So what I was trying to highlight, so part of the regular, so that is not isolated to myself, hence why we created the ITRC committee, so that the key issues, being the key criticalness, because his role is cross-functional, it's not just limited to me. Hence we created the ITIC, so that it's not about me and him discussing issues regarding me being a line manager, but is that it's a broader space that is discussing issues regarding IT. And that meeting, if I recall, was happening on a monthly basis. So
isn't that a different question? If you've got a head of department that is as critical and you only work with them through their, whatever you want to call it, a committee structure. As a CFO with departments that report to you, if you exclude Mr. Ntwane, do you actually meet with your heads or your executive heads of departments that report to you, or only in committee meetings?
So I do meet, like if you see, and I guess it's the weakness of my managerial process, which is still subject to me considering the weakness, is that my meetings are usually, if not always, informal. So that we have meeting and status update.
So there's no minutes and records of these decisions, this is just you having a chat? So he's correct in saying there's no meetings?
So he's incorrect of saying...
No, he's correct, because there's not a meeting, that's a chat.
It's the definition of what a meeting is. So for me, it's a place where we meet together and we discuss critical issues. So
but
that's
if there's
my
no
definition.
record of it, what I'm asking you to think about your role as a CFO with formal responsibilities. This isn't about Mr. Ntwane. This is about when you need to go and look how a decision was arrived at. You have no record of that other than your committee meetings.
So in my meetings with him, no decision, because together we don't have ability to reach a decision. So there will never be a decision that's made. It is in the form of guidance.
But you would have no recollection of guidance then other than your verbal discussions? Because you're saying that as a CFO, and as I don't really understand this, a CFO and your head of IT have no decision-making authority whatsoever unless it's been through the committee?
So if you refer to the delegation of authority, the executive head of IT has a authority up to a certain amount for himself, which and PIC is primarily driven via a memorandum process. So he's got a limit up to a certain amount, which he doesn't need to consult me in order making that decision. The next part when we're having the decisions is a discussion in EXCO. So we'll have deliberations of submission. So I don't have a single decision that I could say single-handedly. So if I recall, then I don't have the delegation of authority between myself here. So you'd have the IT. So you're talking about budgets. I'll have interaction to say, okay, let's discuss budgets. Let's discuss what you've planned, what you've budgeted for. Let's have. So as in my role in terms of the CFO. So in terms of reporting on a monthly basis, in terms of management accounts and stuff, so there'll be deliberations regarding where the expenditures are going, where's the budget heading, where's the actual. But in terms of him procuring systems, he'll have deliberations with the system owner. So, and hence SAP, I was the system owner. So you'd have a deliberation with the system owner. And therefore, it was how the structure was to decentralize it so that it's not about whether I like a system or not, but if a system owner with IT, they are engaged and they like the system, it is then we make sure that it's budgeted for.
Right. A couple of questions from me. I would like to stay on with Mr. Ntwane. And I take your points about the disciplinary, but I would like to, because he has made some allegations, so I would like to put them on record to hear your answers there. If you look at 10.1, I've got his statement here, but I'll just paraphrase it, you know. So 10.1, he says, the CFO, who is an executive director, led a culture that was not only divisive, but also created a great deal of mistrust among the teams. This is 10.1. Can you respond to that, please? That you led a divisive culture and all that.
It's very, so I can't recall his statement. So my answer is, it's very difficult to say what will come back to deciding the word is led a culture of mistrust and divided. Because, you know, in my view, I don't remember saying, don't do this, this one do that. It has always been, I would say this is procurement, make sure you sign off. I'd request that you sign, if a system is there, I would say make sure that all the key owners of the system sign off. So without a specific example that demonstrates exactly what did I do, it's very difficult for me to answer that there was a mistrust.
Let's go to the next one, is 10.2, and he says that I believe the CFO viewed herself as indispensable, and he said that he's the only person who does not have a term limit, and that, you know, that you don't have a term limit, you are indispensable, and all that. He felt that that's what you said, and that you don't have a term limit, you can go on forever at the PIC.
So that's factual incorrect. I can't go on forever at the PIC. I'm currently been on suspension, so it shows I can't go. So the fact that I had no term limit, it's referring to the fact that the only position of executive director that is fixed term is actually the position of the CEO. Previously, the position of the COO and the COO was also a term. It used to be a term, that fixed term, and that was taken away. So the basis of just saying that because I've got no term, I'm indispensable. Everyone is dispensable in any institution.
And then let's go to 10.3. 10.3, he basically says, the rampant unfairness in salary reviews, adjustment and bonus allocations were orchestrated by the CFO through shrewd tactics. How do you answer to that? He says it was rampant and it was done by you and you had some shrewd tactics, you know, in doing that.
In response to that, the first part I would like to say, I think Mr. Polwane highlighted the process that goes through with regards to the remuneration and the remuneration and regrading and incentive. Further on in my statement, I do provide clarification in terms of what the role of finance does in terms of incentive. If we refer to the investigation that was carried out on Mr. Ntwane, the the allegation that was placed was that actually he's the one doing favoritism within his team, that he will give high performance to his favorite people and not high performance. So when you say, when I go to remuneration incentive, I provide my role. So I will not, when he says I had, what's the word he uses? Shrewd
Tactics, yes.
tactics. I don't know what are shrewd tactics, because I'm just a member of the moderating committee, which I sit in with everybody, and everybody presents a balanced scorecard. And then I think Mr. Pulwane have already highlighted, which I further highlight in my statement, the role that we play in terms of the incentive. And I think if my understanding, I'm sure the investigators have actually tested the process regarding the incentive and even the salary adjustment. So when he says shrewd, I don't know what is the meaning of shrewd, to say what, exactly if he provide an example to say this is what you did, and that insinuates it's being shrewd.
Can I just ask you very specifically, he alleges that you reduced his balanced scorecard while he was away without discussing with him. Did you reduce his balanced scorecard? Did you have any say around the changes made to his balanced scorecard? Was there any changes made?
So just to provide, and in answering that, can I please, Commissioner, allow me to provide background?
Can we go to the point? A lot of background here. It's not that difficult a question.
It's not through you, Commissioner, but some of the questions in answering can't just give one time, because I have to give context to say what happened to the balance scorecard through comment. It's not that, I'll be very short.
I want to know yes or no, because you keep giving background and background and background and you don't answer the question. Can you please just ask, was there an issue with his balance scorecard, or was he correct in saying that his balance score was reduced while he was on leave without discussion with him?
So, to provide the answer, there's negative rating. So when the negative rating happened in his balance scorecard, it reduced. So there's introduction of negative rating in balance scorecard. So his balance scorecard remained, and when the negative rating, when internal audit provided a score, reduced his balance scorecard.
Was that discussed with him and done as a part of a full discussion with him?
So
or was he just presented with an outcome?
If I recall, that's when he was on suspension, which the discussion with him happens via HR. And I'll come back to it.
You reduced the scorecard according to the criteria that was presented, and he was then presented with something on his return from leave or wherever he was with the discussion with HR.
I'll have to have a confirmation exactly what time, but everybody's EXCO was reduced with the negative rating.
But you are his line manager. This is a head of IT. You didn't meet with him to discuss that this was the issue, this is what occurred.
He was fully aware, Commissioner. He was fully aware.
Did he? I'm not asking whether he was aware. I'm asking whether you met with him as his line manager.
If I recall, it was during his suspension, which as line manager, during suspension, you only talk via HR. Okay. And I'll come back with the facts on that.
But who did the reduction? Who reduced the score?
So the reduction is the input of negative rating. So what would happen is that internal audit, finance will give an external, so we'll give a rating regarding negative, how much your negative rating is. Then we just input it in the balance scorecard.
And what you're indicating, that affect all EXCO members, it wasn't Mr. Ntwani on his own?
It even exists in the corporate balance scorecard that back in that time we had negative rating.
And if I could just go to the, sorry, Commissioner, but if I could just ask on the question of salaries and adjustments. Mr. Maisela makes a statement that Mr. Brian Mavuka, a general manager in finance whose relationship with the CFO, Ms. Mora, dates back to their days in Deloitte, was awarded a gross salary increase of almost 1 million, to be exact, 975,000. This was done without any sound justification for such an obscene amount of an adjustment. And if you could just indicate the kind of issues, or perhaps come back to that later.
We'll come back to that question. I just want Mr. Lediga to finish his side.
Yes, I'm still on the floor on Mr. Ntwani. On 9.4, I'm just mentioning the paragraphs so that you can follow them up. On 9.4, he seems to suggest that the charges that were sort of preferred against him actually were part of the process to discredit him and get him out of the PIC. And he basically blames you guys.
So, through Commission, the charges are as a result of whistleblowing, so we can't ramp up or create them, and an independent investigation took place that confirmed certain findings. So you can't ramp up, and the interviews, if I recall, the interviews that just happened, they interviewed even his team, and that's how certain outcomes even came back. The whole thing of inappropriate messages sent to female staff members were provided by his team members.
And then he goes on to say in 8.8, he says that, you declined his study bursary whilst it was approved by someone else before you, and that you started to investigate his leave days, and he believes this is part of the harassment and the process to discredit him.
Thank you, Commissioner. The memo regarding bursary is not off. I can't remember clearly the details regarding that, but his leave, I can remember that one. His leave was purely because he wanted to, during that time, if I recall, memory serves me clearly, he wanted to go deliver laptops around to our different offices. This is when we had offices in Cape Town and Umtata and stuff, which I then said to him, at his level, I do not think it's inappropriate for him to deliver laptops. Moreover, when he had taken study leave, that he shouldn't come out of study leave to go deliver laptops to staff members. Therefore, can I maybe suggest that somebody in his team be the one that is actually sent out? So I think that is the example where we're saying, when I said, can you reverse the reversal of his leave, because I think he should stay on study leave and not come back in just to deliver laptops.
And okay, 8.5.2, and what I'm trying to establish here is, were these things part of the normal professional environment and, and communication, or was there serious victimization, so that's why I'm asking these questions to get the answers there. So 8.5.2, this is what he says. I witnessed the CFO passing judgment about performance of staff, and stuff that she didn't have control on, that you were passing judgment on stuff that was reporting to him, not to you, How do you?
So, through Commissioner, I'll answer it differently. So you'd have a moderating committee that has deliberation of inputs. One of the things where we would make comments to say, what happened here, what's the score and the motivation. One of the issues I did, not saying issue, one of the encounters I experienced, it was with one of his employees being Mr. Arne, I forgot his, Arne Leroux, I think, where he directly came to me and said, Mr. Ndwane claims that you are the one who are refusing for me to be recruited. And which I highlighted to Mr. Arne, it's impossible for me to refuse for you to be recruited in any position because I'm not privy to such. I cannot in detail provide. So I think that those are not valid for me. It will be deliberation inside moderating committee. So it's not about isolating, but during moderation committee, as a committee, we'll question the line managers into motivating the balanced scorecard rating. And I think Mr. Pulwane highlighted exactly what the process is.
Okay, yeah, thanks. I think for now I'm done on that one. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yes.
Ms. Marcus's
I remember, it says me, it's the motivate. So let's go. So I think it's 2015, 2018. It was the regrading process that took place. So Mr. Mavuga is not an isolated person, that is the single person who got a regrading adjustment. There was an entire process that took place to regrading, and if memory serves me well, and I think Mr. Polani also highlighted, more than about 200 employees had a regrading, and that regrading was based on principles that were done and applied across the board. So it's not just an isolation of one individual, there's other people who actually were the recipients of that regrading process.
I think one of the questions that was raised is that there was a very significant salary adjustment that was made in that regrading process to a considerable number of people, and thereafter there was a measure of trying to ensure that that could be clawed back in some way, not necessarily from the individuals, but in terms of no increases and so on. When you said earlier, you said your question here was to ensure that there was financial sustainability. There was the process of reorganization and the adjustments made, properly costed, properly supported, validated into the future what the running costs would be or the carry costs would be into the future, that you didn't have this reward for individuals of the scale and then the following year having to claw that back or limit increases. All the witnesses that came said that there was this imbalance between the size of the award and then having to have a very scarce reward system for a period to recoup. What were the issues there?
So I'll provide. So when the regrading took place, and one of the things, and on an annual basis, what then happens is managers need to identify critical positions, which are part and parcel of the recruitment. If you look at our sustainability target, the personal cost target is 40%. We've never reached it. So budget is actually budgeted at 40% of management fees. So the idea that there are no funds available for recruitment is incorrect. Because if you go back and look at our annual management accounts and look at actual versus budget, you'll see that as it relates to personal cost and to cost to company, we've never actually reached the 40% target, which is also the amount that is actually budgeted for. And I think Mr. Polani highlighted in his testimony here before the Commission that each line manager is responsible for identifying the critical positions. It's a critical position, what they're planning to recruit, and therefore, after that has been done as budgeted for, then they have every right to go ahead with the recruitment.
There was no problem after the reorganization and these salary increases. Is that what you're saying? That there was absolutely no problem with benefits, with increases, with recruitment? This was something that the company could cope with very easily?
Could cope, and it's reflected in the management accounts because you'll see that we never exceed budget.
Now, I'm not asking whether you exceeded budget. I'm asking whether there were measures put in place that would limit increases or recruitment post the restructuring. There was nothing at all done. It was all perfectly in order, and you could afford that.
Yes, in terms of affordability, you still have affordability. And just to clarify, there'd been no issue regarding increases because those are part of the remuneration policy. So we could never say you're not allowed to have increases.
Thanks.
Yeah, further two questions before we to Mrs. Decker. I just wanted to ask the questions on the IT side. Did you participate in the separation agreement of Ms. Menye? Because Mr. Polani said that, is something which was not within the policy of the PIC. So as the CFO, did you participate in that and make the payment? Just the first question there.
So
what was your role in that?
The direct role of when Ms. Menye the settlement was reached, I was on maternity leave. So the whole process and negotiation with the contract, I was not. All I was privy of is the outcome of the agreement they reached, that they actually reached a settlement agreement with Ms. Menye. So in terms of, and I think it happened in April, it's around April. So by April, I was not present at the PIC physically. I just attended certain meetings.
Can I just ask if I can have asked Judge, when was your maternity leave period? Because it has come up quite a lot. Let's just get it right. Let's get it right.
So I was on maternity leave from the 23rd of March to the end of August. I'll try to get you the date exactly where about in August. So it was one of
What year was it?
last year.
Oh, 2018. Okay.
Yeah, 2018, yes. So, but what, maybe to put in, I did come in during my maternity leave, I did come into the PIC for special board meetings. And as and when the then acting CFO was not comfortable with, let me not say not comfortable, wanted me to review certain documents because I still had access to my emails, he would then send them to me to actually look into and sign to. So you'll find there's certain things which they would have referred to me while I'm on maternity leave to sign.
So that agreement was signed when you were not within the company?
Yeah,
when you were
so
on
I think
maternity leave?
if I recall, I think it was in April.
Okay, all right.
I'll
all right.
just double check the date
Okay, no,
because
that's fine.
what they just did was tell me that they've reached an agreement.
It was. And what was your sort of reaction, given you knew the rules didn't allow that?
So maybe to clarify, so the rules allow for a settlement to be reached because it's a negotiation between two parties. So there's nothing in terms of PIC policy that prevents such. So in my personal view is, so, it's difficult to say exactly because sometimes when you have an engagement, when it's an agreement between two parties, not knowing exactly what transpired in terms of that resulting in the conclusion, it was that was the amount concluded. My personal view is I do believe they could have, if the final outcome was to reach a settlement, they could have negotiated further. But as I highlighted, it's an agreement between two parties. I was only privy to it post it being completed.
Next.
I'm just looking at the email that you sent to Mr. Ntwane. And the tone thereof. And I'm wondering whether you were angry or whether this indicates that there was something between the two of you that wasn't right. Let me just go through it. Annexure 18. A couple of pages. At the middle of the page, that's your email to him, Mr. Ntwane. You say good day. You don't even say good day who. And then you say, is the content of the email below correct? That you informed a service provider to confirm with me status of SAP? Regards. I mean, is that how you normally write your emails? Regards, you don't even say who.
So just with regards, automatically your name is put in. But with this one, Commissioner had highlighted, I was very disappointed that indeed if this had transpired. Given the current environment that we operate in as SOEs, these are activities that result in irregular expenditure and with the bill that's going up in the fiscus. So I was very disappointed that I could be placed in such a compromised position. So the question, in answering question that I'm not going to say I was very angry, but I was like questioning a fellow executive putting me in such a compromising position of my position and knowing pretty well the criticalness of procurement. Why would he do it?
To me it indicates something. Good day. You know him, he's Luyanda or whatever his other name is. And in the end you simply say regards. It tells me that there was something here.
So,
But you say you were disappointed rather than angry.
Yeah, I think like for me it was disappointment because also as I highlighted in my statement, it was like certain things that have happened regarding the budget, things that I'd taken as innocent. It then now looks like they were not innocent. It was part of the process. So it was more of that, and I don't want to say I was angry, I was highly disappointed to say, in my position, such activities really compromise my position. And I'm of the view that no person, especially in an executive position, should ever put me in such a position.
Just another question, sticking to the IT theme. I think it was Ms. Matebola and others who said that they were spied on by the PIC. I don't know whether you played a role there. I think it could have been when you did the Sense Post thing, that they had problems in the sense that there were about 14 people or so who they said were spied on in inverted commas. Can you comment on that? I mean, do you know about that? I think that list was reduced to 6, from 14 people to 6 people, and I think Matebola and the others, they were there on that list.
So, through you, Commissioner, I tried to ascertain exactly what that related to, and I think it's relating to this letter, which during the Naledi PCX James Nogu, as part of the investigation, the then CEO had written to Mimecast requesting that access to the following employees for the period between 1st of July to 20 October be granted, which was part and parcel of that forensic. So spying on, it's, like I said, part and parcel of the forensic investigation is that you give the forensic investigators access to people's emails. So I can't say it's spying on. It is about an investigation is carrying on and they're trying to seek information. So I'm not sure if you've got a preview to the letter, which was the 20th of October, it's the date of the letter is 20 October 2017.
Just tell me, so can you access communication of staff without them knowing, or, can you do that?
Yeah, yes.
You can.
So, like, I can use this commission. So this commission had a list of employees that they wanted to have access to emails, which they did via Mimecast as part of a forensic investigation. I don't recall if you did specify, because I was just privy because I was one of the people then, hence why I recused myself. So during a forensic investigation, even with the VBAs, the forensic said they wanted, and we just gave them access to it via Mimecast.
So you would say there was no spying. I mean, you're saying there was no spying, it was just a normal process of forensic investigation?
So I would confirm that when the CEO issued this letter, it was regarding a forensic investigation. Now it's a different matter when Mr. Maisela accessed people's emails, in which he was not part of investigation, he was just monitoring people's communication.
And do you know about the one where apparently Dr. Majila asked for passwords of employees, and were you part of that? Because I think it was Ms. Menya who said she was fired, I think that same day or the following day, when Dr. Majila wanted all the passwords or some passwords of employees.
I'm going to attempt to answer it, and some of my information might be, if I recall clearly, the meeting we had with the combined committee of ITGC and the audit, which the discussion happened where it was presented that there's a need to place the 2 employees on precautionary suspension. That took place on Friday. And on that, the then discussion and that deliberation in that meeting was, what is the risk to the PIC if they are permitted over the weekend and stuff? And if I recall clearly, then we accepted that risk and said that we will not we will inform them on Monday. And then on Monday, I think Ms. Menye and Ms. Simpia Maisela had a meeting with the then CEO and the head of HR regarding the suspension. But I think if I recall from the testimony of Ms. Maisela and Ms. Menye, was that prior to that, the CEO had requested that she puts together. And I don't think, I think Dr. Dan will be able to say, I don't think he asked for passwords of employees, because a password of the employee no one will know but an employee. It would be necessary to a collection of the passwords that are critical, so that whoever is handed over to the next position, to acting in that capacity, will have them. So, but I think Dr. Majila would be the best person to answer, but that's what I think I understand was transpired during that event.
I think, thanks. I think we can go to Ms. Decker then, yeah.
Thank you.
And before you do that, then following up on the questions by the Commissioner in Annexure 18, what is strange to me is that if you look at page 3, within less than 30 minutes, you sent 2 mails to Mr. Ntwane. At 7:29, you say, is the content of the mail below correct, that you informed the service provider to confirm with me status of SAP? And then within less than 30 minutes, hi, if you did inform a supplier to contact me directly, can we refrain from doing such? You are compromising my position. And he's not responding to that.
So if you go to the chronological order, you'll see then at 7:41, go back to the previous page.
Yeah.
At 7:41, the guy from SAP responds and says, and CCs Mr. Ntwane, and says, and highlights to me what are the things. So in between that, there was that email, and therefore for me, it created concern that now this guy from SAP is CCing Mr. Ntwane, so meaning confirm, and he then comes back to me and says he'll provide me feedback. So for me, it was concerned to say, is there any communication that happened in between? Because now the SAP at the executive has actually CC'd Mr. Ntwane, and then he's now saying, please, can you please, I'll provide you feedback after I've spoken to procurement. So hence on the side, I said to Mr. if you are, please get him, please refrain, because now if you see this, now this guy is already saying he's representing people that have submitted bids, which is further compromising my position.
The point I'm just making is Mr. Ntwane is not responding to your mails.
So at that point, if you refer to the time, it's quite early in the morning. So those are the only 2 emails I sent to him. So
But in my view, it is a serious matter if the head of IT does this. Normally I would expect the line manager to call in the person and say, what do you think you're doing? Have a chat with him, discuss it with him.
So if memory serves me, we had a chat, but this was, for me, the first reason why I'm sending this was to get in any more emails from the SAP executive for further compromising me, because I shouldn't be communicating. He shouldn't be communicating with me directly. So it was that I'll have a discussion with him and had a discussion with him, but to say, if you are making the SAP guy talk to me, please get him to refrain, because I have to keep my professional side with the SAP executive. So on page 13, under 4.6, based on my understanding of the statement of Ms. Decker, dated the 26th of February 2019, as well as the transcript of her testimony before the Commission on the 26th of February 2019, my understanding is that Ms. Decker made allegations and/or insinuations that she resigned from the PIC due to a dysfunctional EXCO. I do not intend to deal with each and every allegation or insinuation made by her in this regard, and this should not be construed as an admission of any such allegation and/or insinuation. I wish to point out that in Ms. Decker's statement before the Commission, she omitted to disclose what are critical facts regarding her resignation on the 18 April 2016. On 20 April 2016, being only 2 days after her decision to resign, Ms. Decker requested that I consider approving the withdrawal of her resignation. I attach here to Ms. Decker's email to Mr. Polwane inquiring about the process with regards to the withdrawal of a resignation, marked Annexure MM21. This begs to question whether the alleged EXCO dysfunction ceased to exist just 2 days following her resignation. In any event, I deny that the EXCO was dysfunctional as alleged. The sum total of Ms. Decker's allegations appeared to be appears to be that decisions were delayed, thus rendering the exco dysfunctional, and that her values and priorities, close quotation, differed from mine. I respectfully submit that this is a case of an employee elevating professional disagreement to something more in order to paint a sinister picture of dysfunctional.
Did you respond to her?
So my response to her, we actually had a meeting to deliberate, to discuss it, and to discuss her resignation and her request for withdrawing.
And you refused this withdrawal, I suppose?
So I referred her because she officially submitted it to Dr. Dan. I said to her, she needs to go back to Dr. Dan, but I heard her view in terms of what transpired that day on the 18th, which then made her angry.
And you're not privy to what the communication was between the two of them, Dr. Dan?
So I'm not privy to it, but I'm just privy to the discussion I had with her.
I just want to ask a couple of questions on Ms. Decker. The first one is on the COO position. I mean, the first question is this: before it was collapsed, did the CFO report to the COO? How was it? Was the CFO a separate position and the COO a separate one, or one was reporting to the other? Can you remember?
So that was prior to my appointment as the CFO. So the CFO used to sit underneath the COO, and I think then they took a decision that to create independence to sit outside. I think I've highlighted it in my statement that the day I was appointed as CFO, I reported directly to the CEO.
To the CEO, yeah. I get an impression that, she mentioned that after that new structure, the COO position was like frittered away in many ways into corporate services and all that. I mean, do you have a view there that, she felt that this position was sort of dismantled bit by bit, and she ended up with really, quite a minute part of work?
So through you, Commissioner, for me it was not dismantling, maybe my words is not dismantling, but it was restructuring the organization at an optimum level to make sure. And if I recall earlier on, I highlighted we created the executive head of legal, we created the position of executive head of HR, being specialist. So it was not a personal to dismantle a position, but is to reposition the structure and tighten certain positions and elevate them to a higher level, especially because they've got a cross-functional role within the PIC.
And then there's the second last paragraph on her statement, and I think you have referred to it at some point. She says, I reached a point where my values and priorities differed from those of my direct line, the CFO. Can you elaborate? I mean, I think you did speak about it also. What were the values? How were so different? I thought company values are the values, Yeah.
So, Commissioner, it's difficult to say exactly which values, but I can only use what transpired on that day. So on the 18th of April, what transpired is that the then she manager had informally lodged a grievance against Ms. Decker of discrimination and victimizing, in that she had completed her studies and Ms. Decker had not reviewed her or provided some input, if I recall. And that was the discussion which earlier on the 18th, we had a meeting between myself, Ms. Decker and HR to try formulate the next step to make sure that we address the employee's informal grievance, which the employee had lodged directly with the then CEO, who had requested that we look at it. So is that difference in values? I'm not sure what value it is, but that was the day that she resigned. That was primarily the discussion we had, the encounter I had with her. And I can only deduce that it comes from that, because if 2 days later she wanted to reverse her resignation.
And then the next one, final one, is she says that she left, last paragraph of her statement. She left in April 2016, 18th of May 2016, and she had to leave an LTI of 2 million rands. You know, can you comment on that, on that statement?
So the remuneration policy stipulates that for you to be eligible to earn the incentive, you need to be present at the date of payment. So anybody who's left the PIC before the date of payment, they're not eligible to it. So it's not isolated to her, it's applicable to every other employee.
And this was payable end of December 2016, I guess. That's
Yes.
what she okay,
Yeah.
so she was not there to receive that 2 million rand. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. You can proceed on the next one.
So the next part is 4.7 on page 14, it relating to Ms. Pala. Based on my reading of the statement of Ms. Pala dated 28 March 2019, as well as the transcript of her testimony before the Commission on 28 March 2019, my understanding is that Ms. Pala made allegations and/or insinuations that I tried to influence her to change an opinion that she had given regarding whether the PIC could utilize International Financial Reporting Standard International Financial Reporting Standard, which is IFRS, which is an accounting standard. During 2012, one of the new changes brought about by the Companies Act of 17 of 2008 was to do away with the utilization of SA GAAP as the accounting standard. This resulted in the organizations, such as the PIC, being required to prepare their financial statements in accordance with the generally recognized accounting practice, which is referred to as GRAP. It was my view at the time that GRAP was not the ideal accounting framework for the PIC, and that IFRS would be the more appropriate reporting framework. As such, I requested Ms. Pala to assist me in putting together a motivation to request National Treasury to grant the PIC an exemption from applying GRAP. Then Ms. Pala provided me with an opinion to the effect that PFMA does not make provision for a Schedule 2B to convert into a Schedule 2 public entity. Then I tried to engage with her to highlight that her opinion did not address the subject matter of my request, being what motivation we can provide to request an exemption from being required to report in accordance to GRAP. She felt that I sought to make her change her opinion.
Can I just stop you there, please? Because I read those documents, and you know, it strikes me because she did so much work. You know, when I look at the presentation and the legal opinions and all that, how could it be that she can do so much work, and yet this is in the work that you are looking for? I mean, the cost and the time. Were you guys communicating, or there was no communication? Because the work she did probably took weeks, not days or hours.
So Commissioner, we were communicating. So and the key thing was what best way to ensure that the PIC is able to use IFRS. So which she did an analysis between the difference between being a Schedule 3B and Schedule 2, of which my discussion with her is, yes, the big difference between, in my view, and as memory serves me correctly, the big difference between 3B and 2 is just the ability to borrow, and the PIC doesn't need to borrow. If you look at our balance sheet, the only liability we have, I think, is the provision and incentive. That's the biggest. So we had that deliberation. And for me, her view was that I'm trying to change and I'm trying to insist that she apply something, in which for me it was like, you're missing what I'm trying to get. I'm not trying to move away to a Schedule 2B. I'm trying to find reasons that we motivate why we need to exempt her from the application of GRAP. And you know, when she took the view that, and she highlighted, and even before this commission, that I'm trying to influence her in order to do something that's illegal, I then didn't pursue her any further, and therefore went about to do the research to try to find, and I ultimately did find what avenue to use. Then we did get an exemption, and I think 2 years or a year later, the law changed and allowed that institutions that are recognized and have a FICE license can actually use IFRS instead of using GROB.
So are you saying that that changeover from what 2B to 3, what 2C, what is it?
2B, we're 3B.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You asked that question so that you can get to IFRS or something. Is that why you asked the question? But she misinterpreted the question. Could you just come again there because I'm still...
So if you look at the institutions that sit under 2B, so you look at the likes of Transnet, if I recall, Transnet, all the big SOEs actually sit under 2B, and they are permitted to use IFRS. So the discussion was, we need to, so at the end, the outcome we needed is that, in my view, was that IFRS is the ultimate accounting framework that is used at the PIC. And then the first look was, okay, maybe move to 2. And for me, the moving to 2 is a complicated process, and you can't just change and get an application to move from 3B to 2. And if we refer to a research, and I didn't have a copy of it in preparing for the statement, it was highlighting the differences between 2 and 3B. And hence when I started having discussions, say, I see when you say, you know what, we can just move to 2, but the process of moving to 2 is very complex, but we need to relook at what we need to do. And if I recall from a statement, she then said, what she then interpreted that to be is that to put the statement, I think she said in PowerPoint, that deliberation resulted in her putting the statement in a PowerPoint format.
So finally then, so you managed to stay within Schedule 3B with IFRS given, is that?
Yeah. So we got
what
the
you're saying?
exemption. It's Annexure 22. So we got the exemption granted to the PIC to use IFRS as accounting standard, which then subsequent to that, which I've attached as Annexure 23, you see that the accounting standard boards issued a directive that actually permitted SOEs that are registered in accordance to the FICE Act to use IFRS.
Yeah. Then tell me then, was she reporting to you? She was reporting to you, no?
No, she wasn't reporting.
Oh.
So she reported to the executive head of legal.
Of legal, okay. So there was no, because I wanted to check what kind of a relationship do you have with her. Was it a good relationship? Was it a lukewarm, bad?
So my relationship with Ms. Pala for me, it has always been good. You know, I started at the PIC as a financial manager. My office was just my desk was a few steps away from her office. I was there for her when her father passed on. So I would not say my relationship with her was bad. I was in no way of being bad. And like I've highlighted to say, this was just an example of me and her having a disagreement on an opinion, a professional disagreement on an opinion.
Thank you. Let's go.
I speak under correction, but I think she also testified that you mentioned to her that Dr. Dan wants Mr. Netsani. I speak under correction, but that's my recollection.
So if I recall what she said, I think she said that Dr. Dan liked Ernest, and I said something. So it's not about liking anybody. I don't think it's been liking anybody, but it was about and I think in the testimony, the question was asked, and even in Mr. Polwani's statement regarding the recruitment of the executive head position. And I think based on this, I think Ms. Pala would like to be, if I refer to a statement and a testimony before, that she thinks that she should be appointed, and because it was a junior who became successful in that position.
What you're saying successful in getting the position rather than successful in that position, in getting the position.
In the recruitment.
Otherwise, it would be a different kind of success.
No, in the recruitment of that position, he was the successful candidate.
And you didn't say to her that Dr. Dan wants Nesani?
I can't preempt a recruitment. So to say wants Nesani, no, through Commissioner, I never said Dr. Den wants Nesani. Mr. Nesani.
But what has happened here, and it seems strange in any organization, she testified that she was instrumental in appointing Ernest Nsani in the legal department. And she mentored him, and now suddenly the junior is now the boss. Normally in any corporate situation, that is bad news.
It's difficult to preempt who's good at an interview, especially in a specialized field. So, legal is a very specialized field, and I wouldn't want to compare the two to say, Mr. Nesani with VBS, his track record in hindsight is not looking good. So there were interviews done, it was the successful candidate. So I don't think there's any policy in the PIC that says when you're a junior, you're not allowed to apply for a position. And I think if we had such, it would be discrimination.
The final one on this one, when she was here, she was very aggrieved, about the issues and felt that she couldn't get the promotions because, she was sidelined by Dr. Machila. I don't know whether you played a part, in that thing, but she really was aggrieved that she was very senior. She established that department. Mr. Nesani came through. She used to do some of the work, for him. And she just felt she was like sidelined, and I don't know whether you played some part in that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Through you. So it's very difficult to say sidelined, and I think it also, the difference is between which role you played within legal. So in nature, Ms. Pala's role is in corporate of legal. So the PIC hardly is suing anybody, hardly involved in any litigation. So in nature, that role will have more about training, staff, and reviewing of corporate agreements and stuff, vis-a-vis being involved in investment legal. So investment legal, every day there could be a transaction, and so it could be perceived that because, you'd have Mr. Nesani, who was the executive head, and before he was appointed, that he was part and parcel of the legal team that sat in the investment space, so that it could be perceived that because he had more interactions, that is favoritism. But I don't think it was favoritism or but it's just because of the nature of the work that the two did, which is different.
So could you say then that the person who had some sort of knowledge in investment legal stood a better chance of being the head than corporate legal? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, Commissioner, that will always be the case, merely because in terms of corporate legal, there's not much activity. So you'd find the biggest risk in legal we have is investment. Thank you, Commissioner. Now I'm going to commence with section 5 of my statement, which is remuneration and incentive. My understanding is that I have been requested to make a statement regarding remuneration and incentives within PIC because a number of employees who appeared before the Commission raised a number of complaints and or issues regarding the implementation of PIC policies on remuneration and incentive. I've had the opportunity of reading the statement on Mr. Pulwane dated the 27th May 2019, as well as the transcript of his testimony before the Commission on the 27th and 28th of May 2019. I am of the view that Mr. Pulwane has sufficiently addressed the main allegations made with regards to remuneration and incentive. Should the Commission request that I address any specific allegation in relation to remuneration and incentive, I'm more than willing to prepare a supplementary statement.
I must perhaps just put on record here and warn you that after his testimony, the legal team, and I'm not exaggerating, was flooded with SMSs, WhatsApps, and emails complaining about his testimony and the veracity of what he testified. So there might be a possibility of revisiting that part of the investigation.
So maybe to clarify for me, Commissioner, in reading his statement, it was in terms of, so maybe the veracity, the complaints with the language he used in terms of the process and stuff. But for me, it's just the definition of the process or what happens. So in reading his statement in terms of the process that takes place regarding what happens, there's a moderating committee, there's balanced scorecard and stuff. So I'm sure the most of it was the words he used in explaining certain things. So 5.3, I do, however, wish to outline the role that the finance team plays in the recognition of short-term incentive provision. The short-term incentive provision is recognized by the finance team in accordance to the accounting policy of the PIC.
Are you sitting back now from your
Oh, sorry,
mic?
my brain is, okay, no. The accounting policy states, among others, the following. Short-term employee benefit obligations are measured on an undiscounted basis and are expensed as the related services provided. A liability is recognized for the amount expected to be paid under the short-term benefit if the PIC has a present legal or constructive obligation to pay this amount as a result of past service provided by the employee, and the obligation can be estimated reliably. So this is just the words in the accounting policy as it relates to short-term incentive. The short-term incentive, the STI provision is estimated using the approved remuneration policy. It should be noted that in the last few years, the provision recognized has been higher than the approved amount, which resulted in the reversal of the provision. As pointed out in Mr. Pulwane's statement, the bonus pool is approved by the board and/or the shareholder. Once the board and/or the shareholder approves the amount that will be paid as STI, the finance department will then process a journal entry recognizing the approved amount. I attach here too an extract of the disclosure note for provisions for the years ending 31st of March 2016, 2017, and 2018, marked Annexure MM24. Below is a summary of the STI note disclosure for these periods. So just to elaborate, this is just showing the amount that was raised as a provision, the amount that was recognized being the amount that was approved, and the amount that was reversed. Just giving context to the allegation that there were some funds which were stolen. So it was just a reversal of a journal.
What does that mean, reversal?
So it means that, because I've just highlighted that when we recognize in the books, when finance recognizes the provision for incentive, it's using the remuneration policy and it's estimating. So we estimate where we think the rating would be, the bonus payout would be. So if there's a difference between what we estimated as finance versus what is actually approved, we either reverse the journal or you recognize a higher amount. So in the past, because what was actually approved as a payout was less than what we had recognized as a provision, we will have to reduce the provision to take into effect the current provision. I don't know if that makes sense through Commissioner.
But you can carry on.
I think, Chair, this marks the end regarding the remuneration and incentives.
Chair, it's about 20 minutes before we normally adjourn. The next topic is the IO transaction, which is going to take some time. May I propose that we adjourn till 10 tomorrow?
After one or two questions.
Sure.
Ms. Mori, I think we'll deal with them tomorrow, but there's been so much talk about this REMCO issues and all that, and I just want to get some excerpt from the various people. And then I think maybe we can deal with them tomorrow. Except that just one about Mervyn Miller, yeah? He said, you know, on paragraph 141, this is his statement. Ne? He says this: in fact, since serving on EXCO, I have realized that not even EXCO members are taken into confidence of the CFO and the HR head to understand how these calculations about the incentives are done. You know, this is a guy who served on EXCO, and he says he doesn't even know how you and Mr. Polwani do the calculations. And I mean, these are the issues which have probably caused so many problems. If you can comment on that one.
So, through you, Chair. So I think Mr. Polwani highlighted the process to say the biggest input in terms of the incentive is individual's performance rating. Is the biggest input that actually drives everything, which then HR would process it into the system, and as finance, because we also check the provision, will just review it. So let's go. So the REM policy in its current form, by the time it went to be approved by the board, it actually went through EXCO. So the calculations embedded inside the REM policy. I think the most confusion that people have, and this is my view, my belief, is that prior to I think around 2013, there was no pool, but there was in a budgeted amount. So each person had in a budgeted amount. Now, with the introduction of high performance and pool, it then means that you cannot determine the bonus of one person in isolation, because with the pool, it depends on everybody's rating. So I think a lot of people are confusing that, because of it's a pool, you cannot single-handedly calculate Matsepo, because what affects Matsepo's allocation is what the other people's performance ratings are and cost to company. I think it's his view saying he doesn't understand is, I'm just not sure that he was inside the EXCO that actually approved the REM policy for submission to the HRRC, but it did serve to an EXCO meeting, and the REM policy is actually sitting in the intranet of the PIC, so it's accessible to every employee. And from what I understand for HR further, is that if any employee has questions regarding the incentive, HR has put a process that they can go to their REM specialist and actually inspect.
Just on Mr. Muller, has the dispute about his incentive been resolved?
So the answer is no, can't be resolved because so it can't be resolved because it's not within the jurisdiction of the PIC. I think that's what the legal opinion came out. And prior to my suspension, he had referred the matter to CCMA. So at the initial hearing, it can't be because it's a directive by the minister. Does that make sense?
Mr. Commissioner, we will follow that up because I think there has been a resolution to it, but we'll follow it up and report to the Commission. But before, if you're finished, Mr. Commissioner, can I just ask 2 or 3 questions? And I do that for you to prepare for tomorrow, for the AO transaction. You were, before the reconstruction, as you call it in 2015, the CFO. And when Mr. Elias Masilela left, you became the acting CEO. Dr. Machila applied for the position of CEO and he became the CEO. You then became the CFO, and then what people described as these 2 centers of power in the PIC. My first question for you is, what was, or what is still, your relationship with Dr. Machila? The reason I'm asking it is people refer to the 7th floor of the PIC as 7th heaven. Now, whose offices are in the seventh heaven?
So inside the seventh floor, you've got internal audit, you've got myself and Dr. Dan and other boardrooms that are putting in. Then you've got the other side of seventh floor, which is occupied by the executive assistant and also by the driver. So you've got some space that is there, but it's internal audit and the two executives.
Mr. Wellington Masikeza, is he also on the
Yes.
seventh floor?
Yeah, he sits on the other, so I'm trying to describe, he sits on the other, so we sit on the one side, which is elite office, so he sits on the other side, so he's also on the seventh floor.
Now, just for me to understand where I'm going tomorrow and later on, what was the relationship between, and I'm talking about the professional relationship between you and Dr. Machila? Would you pitch up in the morning at office and have a cup of tea, discuss business of the day, or was it everyone in his own corner?
So we've worked together for 10 years with Dr. Machila, so we've always had a professional relationship. So if need be, with two executive directors, and so I'm not sure when you say cup of coffee, it's not necessary that we're having a cup of coffee, is that we would discuss if there's anything, so we'd sit across and there'll be people that go to his office, but we've had a professional relationship because we've worked together for 10 years.
Understand that. And when this whole issue came into the open about MST and pretty low and payment of 300,000, was there a discussion of this between you and Dr. Machila?
So the discussion regarding MST, it was on the basis that, if you recall, on the meeting, the scheduled meeting that was going to take place on the 15th of September, I would have been the acting CEO. So he was scheduled to be traveling. So as the acting CEO, and together, so we put together the PAC because as it related to certain elements of it, it's corporate services. So the deal team put together a PAC and stuff. So I was going to present for him, because the initial meeting was supposed to be a directors affairs committee, which I was going to stand in as the acting CEO because it's a member of that. Regarding the amount paid to Pretty, I never had a discussion with him to say, and I think my first time encountering it is when I think it came out inside the minutes, there was just a discussion regarding it. So I've never had one-on-one discussions, like deep discussion to say, what did it relate to, what was the nature and stuff. So it was more something that I wasn't aware of until, I think, during the investigation.
When it was established by the Butler Commission that that amount was in fact paid, and the board of the PIC then decided to have a look at this, have a commission or the internal audit looking at it. Did you meet with Dr. Machila to discuss a united front to tackle this problem coming out of these emails?
Just to clarify, to tackle what problem? The 300 or?
No, the board of the PIC is in the process of suspending you. They have now decided there's an investigation, they're going to suspend you, and then they gave you an opportunity to come and address them, where they changed their decision. Now, the question is, in that difficult situation, dilemma you found yourself, did you discuss how to tackle this?
So if memory serves me correctly, first, by the time we got to that meeting, we were not even aware that there was a pending suspension. What we came in, so what happened is, let me just go back memory. So the discussion, if I recall, and then Dr. Dan will be able to provide more details, because some of the discussion that he had with the chairman and the deputy chairman I was not privy to, was that there's going to be a DAC to present the case on MST. And as the team, as we always his advisors, would put together all the paperwork. So you had the likes of Mr. Roy helping to put together the investment case and stuff. So did we sit and combine and say, this is our strategy? It's not about a strategy, it is about, okay, this one relates to you, you'd respond, this relates to you, you would respond, this one relates to me. So where it related directly to me, I'd put together the information that provides a response. So it was not about we sat and put together a united front, it was about, did we sit together? Because we were recused out of the meeting and we were sitting outside, yes, we're sitting together, and if I recall, even with other executives.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you. We're going to adjourn until tomorrow morning at 10.
Thank you.
But can I just once again suggest to you, Ms. Mori, that when you are asked a question that draws an answer yes or no, if I were you, I would say yes, stop, or no, stop. And let the questioner go further if they want more from me. Okay? Consider that.
Yes, Commissioner, I will to consider.
Yes. All right. All right. We'll adjourn until tomorrow morning at 10.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.